Our 7th and Pine garage is located near the arcade building. There's some other buildings that are also potentially under development that could affect usage in our garage, and I thought it would be an appropriate time to invite Otis Williams from SLDC to provide an overview of the development in that area, because it could affect usage in our garage. And Mr. Williams took me up on my invitation, so I will let him provide an overview of what's going on with the arcade building in particular.
Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Williams.
Well, thank you. And great. And I also have a partner in crime here who's also interested in the building. So if I get any facts wrong, I'll defer to Steve. Mr. Stephen. But I'll start by saying that the arcade building, as you're aware, is currently owned by the LCRA. And we've been the owner there for probably a little over 5 years. And it is one of the last major buildings in downtown. It's not the last, but it's one of the last. It's a 500,000 square foot facility. It includes the arcade and the Wright building. The Wright building is sort of tucked in there, but together it represents about 500,000 square feet. We currently have a developer who is seeking to close, and this is one of the last few issues that remain is satisfying the parking requirement for the financiers of this facility. And so we were looking for a partnership with the Treasurer's Office, obviously, to help with the financing requirements that we have. As to the development that's going on in the area, obviously the post office was sort of ground zero, and it has continued to have near full occupancy. And the surrounding area there on the west side of it is the culinaria, the garage, and the adjacent apartment complex building there. Syndicate Trust, which is doing very well. And then the surrounding blocks there, you can see things that are currently happening. We have, once the arcade building is done, then we still have the issue with the chemical building, but it will, we think there are people who are interested who will be coming on board to try to redevelop that. You know that there is activity with the occupants of what is called the Complete Gas building now, but I believe that the owner there has a plan for redevelopment once the Complete departs. But that does represent potentially down the road movement of current parkers that are in the garage. But one of the primary reasons that I wanted to come was to say that we truly do need the Treasurer's support and help in getting us across the finish line. This is I would call it the one final step to get us to that point. It is over 200 units there. We have the first floor, second floor, and mezzanine that will be leased by Webster and their functions. And so it's a combination of both affordable housing and market rate homes, primarily the affordable component represents the number of units there, Steve, at the
There's 80 market rate units, 202 affordable units. Webster's taking 55,000 square feet. In the most difficult space in the building is that beautiful arcade space, and they're going to put a 170 seat theater in there, move their art gallery downtown. On the second floor, they're going to have liaisons with nonprofits, and the Holden Public Forum is going to move over from the post office. And on the second floor, they're still sorting out their uses, but it's pretty exciting what options they're looking at for that 28,000 square feet on the second floor. But Webster's campus will now be about 90,000 square feet downtown, starting in the back half of 2015. So it's a $118 million project in this park. Yeah, I know, it's big for St. Louis. And this parking piece is just vital. And we had that and one more approval to go next Tuesday or Wednesday with one of the financial participants, and we can actually get what lawyers call a closing and developers call the loan opening started by the end of June. It's our construction of the project.
So the size of this project obviously is enormous, but it also takes a huge blight off of our one of our remaining historic buildings downtown, and the sources or the capital stack to try and get us to closing here is unbelievable, and so there are just a huge number of people who are participating to try and get us that $118 million. The piece that you're considering this morning, while it may be small, is a critical piece.
So at this time, I would recommend that the parking session go into executive session under section 610.21 subsection 2, Missouri statute.
Well, we're gonna be able to talk about that in
Yeah.
executive session.
Well, you can, if you have specific questions for Ken, but
Well,
there's,
I think we should have.
Sure.
They gave that building to the city when Bell Telephone moved out, didn't they?
No.
Who
No, we own it, LCRA.
Yeah, but where did we get it?
I can explain.
We, LCRA is part of the city.
What
Where
happened?
did we get it?
What happened and why LCRA had to buy that building is when John Steffen's pyramid construction collapsed. John owned, I think, 7 or 9 buildings downtown. This mortgage, the mortgage on the arcade building was held by Bank of America. The Bank of America also held the mortgage on One City Center, the tower over what was once upon a time the Mel Simon Garage, and they held the mortgage on the Laurel. The total amount of the mortgage was $32 million plus years of accrued interest, plus John hadn't paid taxes on these 3 buildings forever. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, Elaine lived through part of this.
Because I remember everything that you're talking about. I was involved in it at the time.
Right. So what the city, I ran that de facto liquidation of the pyramid construction revitalization. The Bank of America took a 50% haircut on that $32 million deal, but the quid pro quo was we had to buy their note out within 2 years.
Who's we?
We being
We
LCRA.
the workout. We the workout. So at that point in time, I was working with all of the other developers. So at the Laurel Apartments, where both the Embassy Suites and apartments are now, the old Village building, Clay Fowler from Connecticut with Amos Harris paid $8 million of the $16 million towards the buyout of the Bank of America note, and then they ultimately developed that whole complex, knocked the bridge down. The state of Missouri came in, did the 7th Street garage. Stacy Hasty bought the old One City Center, renamed it Washington, 600 Washington, paid about $3.5 million for that piece of the Bank of America puzzle. The city got off the $17 million moral obligation debt that had been on the TIF because we refinanced the whole TIF. And that left just the arcade building, and the city stepped in and bought that building for future redevelopment so we could capture a $16 million write-down by the Bank of America on the $32 million. So there are 2 buildings out of the 7 buildings that John held that aren't done yet. The arcade in Jefferson Arms. The one in Grand Center is done, where the old Armory building, the Metropolitan, the Leather Trade, the Laurel, One City Center, the old Mel Simon Shopping Mall. I'm missing a building in there. But what happened was ultimately the city collected $8 million in taxes, got off the refinancing of the city TIF note. All the buildings but 2 have been put back into service. And LCRA had to buy about one building for $4.5 million. In this transaction, as Otis explained, there's this enormous capital stack, gets LCRA back to the same financial position where they were the day before they had to buy the arcade building.
Exactly. We get reimbursed for all of our expenses, and so as part of this closing, it involves the repay to LCRA. The city, you say the city. The LCRA is a separate entity by statute, but it is under the umbrella of the city, obviously. But so it's LCRA, and I call it V because my signature's there.
This hasn't been so quiet. See, he's not the kind of guy that's going to take a beating too easily.
Well, in this case, though, it was to the benefit of the city that we not have these 9 or 10 or 7 to 10 facilities just go up in smoke. And so through Steve's work, through the workout, all the other buildings have been redeveloped as Steve indicated, except for these last 2.
But where did he benefit out of it? Because what I hear, he's totally lost, and he ain't the kind of guy to take a beating like that or a loss like that without saying something.
Actually, John, in April of '08, called me, and I remember the day, it was April 23rd, and asked if I would take over the liquidation of his business because he had hit the wall. He came to a group of 100 creditors on April 30th and apologized and basically turned the reins of the company over. In June of 2010, after all these buildings had been basically transferred to other folks, there were 11 or 12 housing deals that my then partner Doug Woodruff wrote, separated into 3 or 4 different development groups. There were 3,000 people living in them. We've had to finish construction of 1 or 2 projects. And other developers took over all of those. We then went through building by building all of the litany that you just heard about. In June of 2010, John had gotten released from all his guarantees, as had then his wife, Dewana, who passed recently. And John went out to start a new life. And so what John got out of it was being able to be at ground zero. There were severe financial losses taken by some of the banks and some of John's partners. But the city managed to avoid a formal bankruptcy. John had just pitched everything into the bankruptcy court. And today we're looking at one of the last 2 buildings, the arcade. And at the rate we're going, it's safe to predict by June 30th we'll have a construction start on this project, which will be the linchpin to finishing Old Post Office Square. The chemical building will follow. It's bite-sized by comparison. It's about 160 or 80,000 square feet.
Who owned that chemical building?
There's a man out of New York called Gene Lanswhite who's quite impressive, who owns that building, who knows he can get into development if the arcade's done. Nobody will finance the chemical building with the 18-story arcade building sitting there vacant. You do the arcade building, the 8-story chemical building will happen sequentially. And Mr. Lanswhite does have a financing commitment from a bank in New York, and I would predict within 12 months there'll be a construction start on the chemical building too, and Post Office Square can be finished. Now that there's the Roberts Towers building is being occupied right now, and
Who owns that?
guys from Chicago, Bob Burke from
Bourbon Street.
Urban Street Partners. He's a really good guy, and he came in and bought that and the Orpheum and Roberts Loft, and has been done a wonderful job getting those vacant properties back into active life. So this is really just a critical piece of this puzzle, because the 200 affordable units need to park somewhere. And there's just not enough parking in the building to handle 282 apartments and all the demands from Webster University. So this is the nearest and best parking garage, and we've worked out an arrangement with for a long-term lease for the affordable housing residents, so they can park and live downtown. The unique thing about the Dominion Development guys, which is why they responded to the RFP, they've had great success in St. Louis doing artist loss, and they have built artist communities And they're leased up at the Metropolitan in Grand Center and Leather Trades over at Pine and 18th, thank you, Otis. Pine and 18th is, they were leased in 2 months and they have a waiting list of a couple of hundred people. There's a real artist community and they build that and provide the artists with everything from pottery wheels to painting studios to sound studios to dance studios and woodworking studios in the building. So up and down in all the difficult to develop areas of the arcade building, they morph the space into this wonderful artist loft community. And it will add vibrancy to downtown. And these guys are financially capable of doing a $118 million job. They have 2 of them that size going on in Minneapolis right now. So we were lucky to have them come back to St. Louis for their, I think, 4th major project.
Affordable housing downtown, I heard you say something about that.
And market rate housing.
Or market rate, but
Both.
not affordable housing.
Both. In the chemistry of this building, there's going to be that mixed-use community. When I developed the Hampden Hall project just north of the cathedral, 20 years ago, we pioneered 1 tower is affordable and 1 tower is market rate, and it worked phenomenally well. And that model's been replicated successfully other times. And you get economic integration that way, and it's just a really good model for the city of St. Louis. It's a very successful development model. So, and these guys from Minneapolis are real pros.
So for us, it helps us and satisfy. We took out a loan to buy the building, and so as part of the closing, we get reimbursed and we get all of our commitments paid. And so we, as indicated, we get back to ground zero. So this is a very viable deal for the city or the city entities like LCRA. And so we just hope for support from the church folks in the sense of being able to provide spaces that will accommodate and help with satisfy the banks and financiers of the property.
Well, we should be in that kind of business.
Okay, any other questions for our visitors about the arcade building? Okay. Mr. Board, are we going to discuss 5B or is that next?
Let's go into close. I would recommend that we go into closed session.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Point of clarification, it's based on 610.21 subsection 2.
So noted. So moved and properly seconded that we go into closed session. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you,